like to start today with love. I'm just curious how many of you have experienced love this weekend. And I'm not speaking of that conditional love, right? The unconditional love. It's easy to drop into and recognize ourselves as in this context, isn't it? I've been present to how one of the things in my own experience that assists me in having that unconditioned love be able to shine forth, this recognition of our shared being, it's fearlessness. And I had the chance last night to ask Jean Houston, thank you, wise Jean Elder, for being at this conference. I had a chance last night at dinner to ask her about fear. I was just curious, her life is, have you ever known anyone whose life is that adventurous and full of so much exploration? And I had a chance to ask her about fear. And she, in different words, basically said, I don't do fear. It was really striking to me. So I want to start by acknowledging with this topic that I bring into the room today that a part of me had some nervousness given that I don't see myself as an expert on this topic. It does seem to me to be a very important conversation. And as I was sitting with my own nervousness around it, I recognized that part of the nervousness is a byproduct of our patriarchy, this idea that I have to be an expert in order to open a conversation. And it's also, I think, a byproduct of our own whiteness, that it's difficult in our seeped with whiteness culture to feel comfortable saying, folks, I come with great vulnerability and openness, and I recognize that this is a topic that has a lot of charge around it, and I don't have the answers, and it's important. May we please engage? Thank you. So I want to recognize that this is, to me, a conversation. I'm not here to bestow anything. I really feel that this conversation is about us. If you're in this room, I trust that you care deeply. And that is something that holds us together. That care and that love holds us together. It's who we authentically are. By the way, I do want to refer you to someone that I think of as an expert, specifically around race relations, if you're interested in that. And I invite you to check out Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams' work. She wrote Radical Dharma, and she's a badass. I want to also quote Rupert from the other night. I was deeply struck by this statement. In order to fully realize our humanity, it is necessary to recognize our divinity. Deeply moved by that statement. I was also, I felt that my heart was on fire as he spoke about something that's been important to me for quite some time now, and that's knowing what's true in all circumstances, in all situations, in all time. And knowing what's true, for me, I'm very karmically wired to be highly relational. For me, I'm specifically interested in what's true for all people, in all circumstances, in all times, for all people. So I wanted to prime the pump for our conversation with this. The relative is the absolute, touching race, injustice, and love. When we engage in the distortion that the relative plane is separate from the absolute, that it's something to transcend or just an illusion. I trained in a Zen monastery. I'm quite familiar with it's just an illusion. We ignore the reality of the illusion. What is the illusion comprised of? What is it made of? How is it known? And by whom? The relative may appear to arise out of the absolute as waves appear to arise out of the ocean, but like waves, both the relative and the absolute are components of a greater whole. They're not separate. And when we know ourselves as this whole, which subsumes everything, we cease to diminish or dismiss the mystery of being human. You like how I wove in the theme? We experience viscerally that the world is my family. We really could use that during these times, couldn't we? The recognition that the world is my family. Not just the people in this room that we like, that we have something in common with, but to recognize the commonness in the whole. So from this understanding, we recognize that liberation is not a singular experience. There can be no individual ego that experiences enlightenment, and we suffer when we forget that. We suffer when we perceive ourselves as separate from the collective, on the level of consciousness, the absolute, as well as our neighbor, the relative. When we recognize the world as arising in us, awareness, there is nothing to dismiss. How then, in our own situation of privilege on the relative plane, how do we dismiss injustice and bias, cruelty, in the name of transcendence or spiritual understanding? How do we participate in systems of oppression while ignoring the effects on our neighbor as well as the whole? And do we fall for this story that the awakened life is mine to have rather than ours to be? And what does love have to do with it? I promise I won't sing Tina Turner right now. So with that, I ask, what are you present to? Where do we go from here? This is an open conversation.